guys, I'm here to make a mini book about our recent trip away to Port Fairy, and I'm using this Kitaholic kit from April. You can see I've got some of the pattern papers here, and I've actually mixed in some plain coloured cardstock from my stash because it was a beach holiday and these are the kind of colours that I want to use. So what I've done is I've cut these pieces of the cardstock to, let me just double check so I don't get my measurements mixed up. This is 4 inches by just under 5.5 inches. And then I've done a couple of score lines, one at just under 3/4 of an inch and one at 3/4 of an inch from this one. So I used my scoring board and just my my paper trimmer to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold this over like this, and this is going to be where I end up binding this little album, but I'm not going to do that until the end because I want to be able to work with these pages a bit more freely. So I'm going to put all the photos and journaling and embellishments on while the pages are still loose, and then I'm going to go ahead and bind it at the end. But this, by doing this folding over bit, I give myself a little bit more room between the pages so that when it's got embellishments in it, this side doesn't become super fat while this side is still really narrow. There are going to be 1 or 2 pages where I'm actually going to do fold outs, so they might be even fatter again. So what I'll probably do is just put another little strip of plain cardstock in here just to give it that little bit more height again and give room to what I want to actually put on that page. And that should become clear as we go along. So that's my plan. I did all of my cutting beforehand. What I actually did, because I had so many photos from this trip and I wanted to find a way to include as many of them as possible, I did a little bit of planning in my little book here. So this is me sort of sketching out what I think I'm going to do on each of the pages, and it helped me sort of plan it a little bit, which is great. And then I was able to kind of work out how I wanted to do the sizing of each page and what was going to fit. So each of my photos, I mean, I've cut photos in different shapes and sizes, but I did a little template for each one to make sure that it was actually going to fit on the pages. So I just did that with printer paper because I didn't want to waste any of my cardstock by cutting it out and then realizing it was slightly the wrong size. So that was a way of me making sure I was able to kind of do that as effectively as possible. And then what I've done is I've printed all of my photos out. So they're all different sizes. This one is like well, they're not all different sizes. They're one of about 5 different sizes, but there's a fair bit of variation in there. And there are a lot of them, but I'm going to include a couple of pockets. I'm going to do some flip ups and some other fun bits and pieces to make sure that everything goes in here the way that I want it to. So there are a lot of moving parts, and I'm hoping that that means that this will come together well, but I'm sort of, you know, a little bit nervous because like I say, there's a lot happening. So let's just get stuck in and see how it comes together.
Okay, so this is a long video. I'm going to put a timestamp down in the description if you just want to see how it looks at the end and to see a flip through. You can have a look at that. But if you'd like to see the process and hang out with me for, you know, about an hour, this is what we're going to do. So for this first page, I've got a photo that's a little bit bigger than the page itself. And I did that on purpose because I wanted to create a little flip out. I'm doing that with some vellum, and basically I'm just going to adhere that between the cardstock and the photo, and I'm going to fold it so that that creates a little hinge. I'm going through this process now and showing it to you in full. And when I make other ones on later pages, I'm not going to show you the whole process again because that will get a bit repetitive. But anytime I make a hinge, this is how I'm doing it. I'm just using a bit of vellum and making sure there's none that's sort of sticking out and hanging over the top and bottom edges. And I'm catching it there between the photo and the patterned paper. For this one, I folded it just with my hands, but with future ones, I actually did end up using my scoring board just to make sure that it was as crisp a fold as I could make it. But yeah, that's the only difference between this and all the other ones that I end up doing. So that allows this photo to be, that allows me to use a bit of a bigger photo, which is fun. And it also then gives me a little space on the back of the fold out part to show off the fun paper, which, you know, is part of the the fun of making something like this using beautiful pattern paper. You get to sort of enjoy it. But also to give me somewhere to do a little bit of journaling, which I will actually come back to at the end. Most of the way through, I'm doing my journaling as I go, but for this one little one, I actually forgot to do it at this stage, and I moved on because I was super keen to get going. But yeah, I'll come back and add that a little bit later. This is a really simple page. This is literally a full page photo, which is nice and easy. So I'm just putting these pages together so you can see how they will actually open out. And you can see that whole spread. And now turning over to the next page. For some of my photos, I did like a little photo strip, like a photo booth, like you might get coming out of a photo booth is what I mean there. So when I've got a series and there's like a little series of expressions or actions that I want to catch, this is a kind of a fun way of doing that. And you get 3 photos in quite a small space, which is really good. So I am using this photo of Artie and Katie cooking dinner for us. So when we went away to this beach house together for the weekend, for the Easter weekend, we had different plans about how we were going to cook and eat together each night. So, but on the first night, Artie really wanted to make dinner for everybody. So we brought the ingredients down for vegetarian bolognese, and he and Katie got stuck in the kitchen and made us a yummy dinner, which was lovely after a long day of driving for everybody to get to the town we were staying in. So yeah, that was really good. So I'm layering that up with first some tissue paper, then a doily, and I'm putting a little bit of tangled thread in here. This is going to be one of my main embellishments throughout this little book. I often like to do stitching, but because I was going to be working on the front and back of each page, I didn't want to stitch through them. And I thought this was a nice way to get that same sort of texture of thread. Well, not the same, but, you know, to get that thread texture and that sort of nod to fabric and textile without having to stitch in the book itself. So you can see I've added those little messy loops in, and I hold those in place with a little bit of tacky craft glue, but I make sure I put that in a place where it's going to be covered up by either a photo or an embellishment. And then I come in with my other adhesives to add the other pieces on top. I'm going to switch between adhesives a little bit depending on the transparency and the sort of strength or robustness of the different papers and things that I'm using. I will switch in and out there. So trimming the edges off. I have to be careful when I'm trimming not to trim through the loops of thread. I want those to hang over the edges and not be cut. Put a bit of twine through my little shipping tag here. These are one of my favourite ways to add journaling and layers. I love shipping tags. It's possible that I overuse them, but I do not care because I just really like them. So I've put some journaling on that, and now I'm going to do another full page photo. This is Jen. She had her 40th birthday a couple of months ago, but she lives interstate, so this was the first time we'd seen her since her birthday. So we had some cards and gifts for her when she arrived, and that was really nice. So there were 5 adults and 1 kid on this holiday. So if you're wondering who all these different faces are, that's who they all are. They're Jen and Craig, you can see in those photos there, playing a game with Artie. And then Katie, who I'm sure you'll recognise from other videos if you've ever seen any of my other videos. She turns up quite a lot in Project Life and things like that. And then, of course, Sarah Jane, Artie and I. So I'm playing with different photo orientations, which provides a nice amount of variation, even though I have only got one size of page. These pages are all kind of, I think, 4 inches square, not including that part at the side where I'm binding them. But I'm finding different ways to add my photos in there. So you can see I've got some horizontal, narrow ones. I'll do them those same sizes vertically later on. And when you mix that up, you create a lot of visual interest within quite a small kind of canvas, I guess, which is fun. So there's that photo of Artie and Jen and Craig playing games together in the evening. We all love playing board games and things like that. And we discovered that some of us had brought the same ones along, so we have similar favourites, which was really nice. And Artie loves having plenty of people to play games with. He's an only child, so when he gets that opportunity, he really likes it. So these photos are from the next day. You can see I did another hinge there, but didn't show you the whole process. This is going out for breakfast, which was really nice. had yummy food, and then Craig taught us a new game to play, which was really fun over breakfast. Like, it was a rhyming game, which makes a nice change from things like I Spy. You know, it was cool. Well, and Artie loves word games because he's a bit of a word nerd like his mum's. So that was really cool. And I'm doing some journaling about that here on this tag. Obviously, I've added some twine to that. I have 2 different colours of twine that I'm using here. I've got a sort of navy and white, and then a pink and white. And I'm going to add, every time I add an embellishment, almost every time, I'm also putting in a little bit of this thread, because that additional texture really does make all the difference, I think, to making a page feel a bit finished. And I've got a few different colours of that too. I've got this kind of nice blue. I have a sort of coral pink, and then it's not white, it's like a light cream coloured one. And I'll alternate between those depending on what else is happening on the page. So moving on here, this is a photo of Katie and Jen. Katie found my scrapbooking journaling supplies and got my sticker book out and decided to stick stickers all over everybody's faces. So I got a photo of Katie and Jen doing that. And then another full page photo here, which is of the door knocker on our little holiday house there that we rented, the little Airbnb. It was really pretty. This town, Port Fairy, is an old whaling town, and it's like a lot of the old kind of whalers' cottages in bluestone and that they're just really beautiful. So there are lots of cute little vintage details on lots of the houses, and that's one that I wanted to catch. So on this morning, we actually went down to the beach. It was probably the last hot day of the summer, and I took a bunch of photos of us just playing in the water, of Katie and Craig throwing the frisbee, but mostly of Artie and Sarah Jane and I just kind of playing in the waves. I was brave and took my phone in with me, but I was very careful, and I'm glad I took that risk, because I got some really, some of my favorite photos of these two ever. So I'm really happy about that. But because I had so many, I had trouble choosing. And what I've done is I've actually printed them out in little squares, and I'm creating little flip ups. It's the same process. I am showing you again because it's on a different scale, but it is literally the same process as I did on the other kind of fold out pages to create that little hinge using vellum. And I'm just going to put 2 by 2 grids, which makes 4, on each of these pages. And they're going to have photos, journaling, and some of them will have embellishments. So I'm just going to show you what I did here, just so you can see. I'm going to put in some embellishments in a minute, but this is just the kind of configuration of patterned paper to photos. And I really, really love this. I think this really captures what that morning felt like, the beautiful blue ocean and sky, and how the papers from the kit really make these photos look really nice. Like, there's that kind of lovely kind of aqua blue kind of stuff going on, and I just think it's really lovely. So I'm really stoked with how this turned out, and I want to just add a few embellishments on top of some of these. I really like the chipboard embellishments that came with this kit, because they're Easter themed, but they're also kind of, there's, like, you can see here, there's a little sun hat, and there's some flowers and birds and cute things like that. This book is going to get very chunky very quickly, so I'm actually just peeling the backs off the chipboard and just kind of making them as flat as I possibly can. This hat looked a little bit like Katie's hat, so I thought that would be a good way to use this one. I don't often use embellishments like this in my own memory keeping, so this seemed like a great opportunity to use an embellishment that I might otherwise not use, which always makes me feel happy. So I'm sticking that in there with a little phrase sticker. These phrase stickers were not from the kit. They're just from my stash. I think they're mostly from that Tim Holtz sticker book that everybody has, but there might be 1 or 2 other ones that I fished out as well. This was a long, skinny phrase sticker that I just chopped into 3 and then stuck that down. I also had a couple of random chipboard pieces that came from my stash as well. Ones that mentioned April or Easter I fished out. So again, not from the kit, but ones that kind of complemented the theme of the book, but also the colours that were in the kit. So this one says on this April day, and I'm pretty sure that's an Ali Edwards one. And there'll be 1 or 2 other ones that will make an appearance as we go through. But otherwise, everything else is from the kit, like the rainbow and the butterfly and all that kind of thing. So this rainbow was again, I'm just peeling the back off it, but it's a perfect size and shape to fit on that little flip up there. And I think it looks really nice on that purple. It provides a nice contrast. And then this little butterfly is also really cute, and it was also a good size, but I decided to sort of tilt it a little bit and trim the wing a little tiny bit just to make it look like it was sort of flying off a little bit. I didn't want the wing poking out from the back. I really wanted the front to be quite crisp and to sort of have that grid contained. On other layouts, I probably would have just let it go over the edge, but I didn't want that on this particular occasion. So I'm just going to trim that off there with my scissors. I'm definitely going to start sounding a little bit more husky, and as this goes on, my voice is going to get tired. But I'm going to press on because it's a long video and I want to get it done so you guys can see this project, because I absolutely love how it turned out. A few more phrase stickers on there. I'm going to come back and put some other things on the front of these little flip ups. But my intention is to use alphas for that, and I'm going to come back and do the alphas at the end because I think that that's going to work best for me. So here we go again, making another little flip out. I won't show you the process, but this is the same thing. I've got that vellum hinge there, and it's going to go on, and we're going to have another little repeated element there. And because this is just plain blue, I want to add a little bit more to it when I embellish it, rather than pattern paper. I mean blue instead of pattern paper. Hopefully that makes sense. I just tangled myself up a little bit there. But yeah, obviously when you put the little label on top of that, it just looks like it needs a little bit more. So I'm grabbing my tab punch and I'm going to use that to make a little tab to put alongside it and layer it up a bit. I love using punches for projects like this because it means you can create embellishments that match your papers perfectly because you're making them out of the papers. So I feel like you get a lot more out of your scraps and your little offcuts because you can use them when you punch shapes out of them. And yeah, it's just really easy to make kind of coordinating elements, because when you've got lots of pages, like 10, 12, 20 pages, you're never going to have enough like die cuts to create consistent elements all the way through those, unless you have like multiple packs of the same die cuts. So having a punch is a really great way of making sure that you can repeat an element all the way through and get that real sense of cohesion. So tabs are good for that. Stars and hearts are really nice sort of generic shapes that you can then repeat using those patterns and pattern papers from your kit. I hope that made sense. So yeah, I'm layering up with a doily here. I love doilies. I love the texture that they add. And I think whenever you're using pastels, doilies kind of tone in really nicely. They add to that softness that you get from pastel colours. And it works quite well with my kind of idea of Easter and, that general theme. So I'm pretty happy with this. A little bit of tangled thread, little doily, and I'll come back to that one again at the end as well. So this is us picking up our fish and chips for dinner. So the photos are of us visiting the fish and chip shop. And then here is what we got and what ended up on the table. It's quite a bright picture, so I feel like it can handle having a decent sized embellishment sort of positioned right in the middle of it. So I'm going to stick that down onto the page, and then I'm going to put that embellishment on top in the middle. And I think it kind of softens it. Again, I'm taking those layers out so that it's not too chunky, and adding a little bit of this nice coral thread to continue adding that layered effect. I do like the way that it does create, feels like there's another layer in there without adding any bulk when you do this with thread. That's a really satisfying kind of effect that you get there. I think I'm going to put two little bits of the thread in there, and I'm going to use one that's pink and one that's that pale yellow colour. You can't really tell that well on screen, but in person you can tell that they're different colours. When I want the embellishment to hold thread down, I do add a little bit more glue just so that it can really get in there amongst the strands of the thread and make sure everything stays nice and stuck. So here I have a little collection of photos that I want to put into a pocket. So this was our evening. We came home and had our fish and chips, and we had a really nice broccoli salad with it, just so we had something green with all of those delicious carbs. And then afterwards we played games and we made this delicious dessert. We got waffle cones and we put broken up Easter eggs and marshmallows inside the waffle cone. We wrapped them up with tin foil and stuck them in the oven and roasted them, baked them. You could do that on a fire, but we didn't have a fire. So we had that for dessert and it was delicious. So you can see I've made that little pocket and put a doily, kind of folded it over the top to create a pretty layer. And what I'm doing now is I'm just adding one little strip down the bottom and each side of cardstock that's about the same thickness as my photos. And that is just going to allow it to sit up the tiniest little bit, the pocket, to sit up the tiniest little bit off the back page, the page that it's sort of stuck to. And it just makes it a little bit easier for the photos to come in and out of the pocket. It's just not quite as tight a squeeze. The photos will stay in there because they won't be loose. They're not going to just slide immediately out, but it just kind of, this is a nice sort of in between that just gives you a little bit of wiggle room for getting them in and out. I want to embellish this pocket a little bit further, so I'm grabbing a couple of bits and pieces from the embellishments that came in our kit. I let that glue dry, by the way. You didn't see the drying time, obviously, but I wouldn't put photos into a pocket that still has wet glue on it because sometimes things can get a little bit stuck. So yes, I'm going to use this beautiful flower as like a sort of, a feature embellishment. I think it's so pretty. And then I'm going to add a little bit more thread around it and one or two other bits and pieces on there as well, just to kind of really embellish this pocket. It just seemed like an opportunity to have some fun with embellishments. So yep, some more thread going in there, and then that will get stuck down again with tacky craft glue. And oh yeah, that's right. I was a little bit indecisive about how I wanted to do that. But yeah, just using my fine line bottle there, which makes it easy to get it in underneath all the little different sections of that die cut. I also want to put a little bit of journaling in this pocket to explain, like I want the recipe for that dessert, because I took a picture of the ingredients. I didn't end up getting a picture of the finished ones after they came out of the oven and we ate them. I only have a picture of the ingredients. I think we were too busy eating them to stop and take photos. So I want the recipe or the instructions in there with it, as well as a little bit of journaling about what we did that evening. So we played a fun game called Dixit, which I love. And if you enjoy stories and imagination games and art, that's a really great game. And it's a really lovely one to play with kids. It's fantastic for getting their imaginations going. And a few other games. So that was fun. And so that's one kind of section of the evening, kind of all contained in one little pocket, which I love. So moving on to the next morning and the next page, this was Easter morning. And again, I think I said there were 5 grown-ups and 1 kid. So we still had an Easter egg hunt, but 3 grown-ups were in charge of hiding the eggs and 2 grown-ups and 1 kid were in charge of finding them. So I've got these photos that I want to create a little fold-out kind of accordion thing. Again, the hinges are exactly the same as they are in everything else, but in this case, I've used multiple hinges to create a little, like a little accordion, because I had a bunch of photos that I wanted to include, like action shots of Artie hunting for the egg and Craig helping him. And, it was about kind of capturing the feel of what that little part of the morning was about. I want to add a little doily underneath it, just peeking out, which I think adds a nice little layer. And on our chipboard sheet, there was a really cute little bunny, and that seemed perfect for the Easter egg hunt because, Easter bunny. I want to add a little bit of twine on here that we can tie to close up the accordion and just sort of keep it contained. And it's fun to have like a little bit that you have to kind of untie, like a little present to reveal what's inside, I guess. But I needed to make sure that it was underneath, sort of between the doily and the actual fold out part. And I put the doily down first, so I had to carefully kind of lift that a little bit and tuck it in. But that was fine. Peeled the back off the bunny so that it was nice and flat. and I'm going to stick that on the front here. I ummed and ahed about adding other embellishments to the front, but the bunny is so bold, and also there's quite a lot going on the facing page with that embellished pocket, that I decided to leave it quite plain. I did want to put a little bit of tape on here so that I could hold it in place and it wouldn't slide around too much while I was tying it up. And then in a minute I will just stick it down onto this page with some double-sided tape, and that will keep it nice and firmly in place. You'll notice I haven't done any journaling yet, because this time I want to do my journaling directly on the page, on the pink part of the page around the doily, and then you get that nice kind of, it draws attention to the sort of rounded edge of the doily, which I think is really nice, and it gives me plenty of room to write. So that's a nice kind of way of doing that, I think. It's just started raining here quite loudly, so I hope you can't hear that in the background. Yes, it's a rainy autumn day here in Melbourne, and it's making it extra nice to look back on this kind of time at the beach and this warm days. So it's lovely. So here is another full page photo. Here's Katie with an experimental egg. It was a flavour that we hadn't tried before. It had Whiz Fizz inside it, which was pretty yummy. So this is her showing me what it looks like on the inside after our hunt. And then in the afternoon of that same day, I have a few photos sort of from that time. We went for a walk and I found a chalk rainbow on the ground. We got ice cream, which, on Easter seems a little bit crazy because there's so much chocolate already around the place, but they had Easter bun flavoured ice cream, and it was hard to say no to that. And then there's a photo there of Sarah Jane playing cards at the table. So this is sort of a little snapshot of what our sort of quiet afternoon at home looked like. And that was really lovely. So I'm just going to stick those down. And I've got 3 photos, but to finish the grid, I'm going to put a little embellishment in there as well. It's a little plant in a pot, which doesn't seem necessarily on theme, but we did hide a bunch of eggs in plant pots and pot plants around the backyard. So it actually does work sort of thematically as well as just being cute. So I'm pretty pleased with that. A little bit more thread under there to maintain that element. A bit of glue. I'll stick that down. You'll notice I haven't put any tiny scale embellishments on yet. I do that at the end, like enamel dots and the little finishing touches. I find it easier to do that all in one go at the end. So if you're looking at it going, oh, that looks a bit unfinished, don't worry, I'm going to come back to it. And this way the video hopefully is it flows a bit better and isn't too slow, because it's already very long. So here's another pocket that I'm making exactly the same way as I did the last one. I am going to, instead of putting a big embellishment on there, I'm just going to put a cute little bow. Same deal with the chipboard, taking the back off to make it nice and flat. And then I'll add a little bit more thread there too. This is from when we went out for dinner that night. We went to a really beautiful restaurant called Merry Jig, and it was so delicious. And it was this beautiful kind of cozy vintage old building, and there was a fireplace in our dining room, and we had yummy food, the most delicious pavlova and chocolate mousse, and it was a really cozy evening. So again, I've got a bunch of photos of that, and they're all getting tucked away in that little pocket with a little bit of journaling. I'm not going into huge amounts of detail. I'm just kind of being pretty surface level, this is the place we went and this is what we did, which is generally how I do my journaling on travel journals and things like that. It's more about reporting rather than feeling, although, that varies depending on what's going on. So this is the next morning, and I have these 2 photos. Like I was saying before, these are now in a vertical orientation instead of horizontal, and they look quite cute next to each other. I thought these 2 pictures sort of lent themselves to the tall and narrow. So there's Artie having some yummy breakfast, and I took a picture of my feet near some lavender in a pot because I liked the colours of the lavender and the gold on my shoes, and just seemed like a nice little photo. Here's another little fold out one that is of some dahlias. I think I will always think of this trip when I see dahlias from now on. On this last morning, there were some being delivered to one of the shops in town as we walked past, and there were these beautiful massive bunches that had clearly just been picked from the farm, and they still had little lady beetles on them, and they were all different colours and sizes, and I just saw them and they just made me happy. I just fell in love with them. So I bought 2 really big bunches and we brought them home. And this is a photo of just one of the flowers. So I felt like that deserved a nice big photo, and when you blow it up big, you can actually see one of the little lady beetles there on the petals. You'll see that when I open it out. So I'm just creating a little spot here for some journaling and some of those layers, and you can see now that I'm just repeating the same ingredients, even though the configuration sometimes varies a little bit. It's the same ingredients that I've been using all the way through: tissue paper, doily, a shipping tag, and yeah, it's like a little recipe, but you can kind of change it up each time to suit the photo and the space and the journaling and the things that you want to do. Another little chipboard flower there, which obviously was appropriate, and a little phrase sticker that I'm cutting in half so that it fits. This last morning was just Sarah Jane, Artie and I, so Jen and Craig were heading back to Perth, to Adelaide, and Katie had already left, so it was just the 3 of us kind of wandering around town. We had our breakfast, we visited a bookshop, which is our favourite thing to do, browsing around in a bookshop, or certainly one of our favourite things. So this was a nice sort of way to say goodbye to Port Fairy and finish up our trip. So yeah, that was a really lovely time. So I'm just going to layer those guys there, and that glue will hold the thread in place. A little bit of journaling, and that is good. Again, I'm going to come back to this in a little minute and add a little bit more on the inside, but I'll do that once I get down to the smaller scale embellishments. When we had packed the car up and we were about to head back to Melbourne, we decided just to head down to the beach one more time. It wasn't sunny anymore, it was kind of overcast, but the ocean, you know, that smell and the sound, it's still very good for the soul. So we decided we wanted to go stick our feet in the sea one more time. So I took a picture of us all together with our feet in the water, and then Artie was just having a bit of a run around and being a bit playful. So I took some photos of him too. This is him waterbending. If you've seen Avatar: The Last Airbender, you'll know what I'm talking about. And if you haven't, then you'll think I sound a little bit crazy. But yes, this is him waterbending. And then this is a series of photos of Artie like just kind of enjoying his feet in the water, but then he was sort of playing and being silly, and then he fell over on his butt and got all wet, and we had a big laugh. He was laughing too, don't worry, we weren't laughing at him while he was having a sad time. It was just, he saw the comedy of the moment as well, and I think it was like the stakes were pretty low because we had like changes of clothes in the car, obviously, because we had all of our bags heading home. So it was just, it was a silly moment and not a stressful accident, you know. And I love it because you can see him like playing, and then I captured I was just taking the photos of him playing, but I was able to capture it as it happened, of him sort of falling over and then like sort of on his knees in the water laughing, and I really like those photos. So this is a really big embellishment from the die cut pack, and I don't think I was going to use it. It's sort of the kind of thing that you would put on a 12 by 12 layout, like it's on a large scale. So I decided that I would just trim off some of the flowers and fussy cut them out a little bit and use those as a little embellishment, because using a little bit of it is better than using none of it. So that's going to poke out from the side of these photos here, which will get layered up nicely on top of this doily and a little bit of that blue thread there. And I will stick that down. I'm using glue here for some reason instead of tape. In fact, I think I'll probably switch out and start using tape on this one. Yeah, I was using glue on the other one because I had put it there for the thread. So they get stuck down. And then I'm just going to trim that off. And this is the last page. So these are all my pages. A little bit of journaling at the end about what's going on in the photos. And now I'm just going to go through and add some more embellishments. So you can see what I've got here. I have these alphas, and I'm going to use, I'm not going to use like the bright blue or the dark purple, or I'm going to be selective about the colors that I use and just pick the ones that I know are going to go with the pattern papers. These came with one of our kits a couple of months ago. So they are from a Kitaholic kit, but they're not from this particular month. So I'm just going to quickly put a couple of things on the cover. I'm going to put this flower on that is going to echo the flower that's on the pocket inside the album. And I'm going to put this doily on there because, again, that's one of the main kind of design elements that is repeated throughout the pages. And so is thread. So I'm going to put a bit of that under there as well. And I like having it oriented off here to the left because I'm going to bind this in a way that's going to, I'm not actually quite sure how to explain it without showing you, but having this leftward orientation towards the binding works really well. So you'll see that in a minute once that comes together. So that's going to get stuck on there. And I want to make sure I've got the dates on here as well as a title. So I'm going to put Port Fairy on using the colours of these alphas that work. So there's a couple of pale pinks, a pale blue, a sort of dusty purple, and a light kind of aqua teal colour. So they're going on there. I love the way that looks. I really like the scale of those alphas for this size of book, so that works well. I'm using some Distress Oxide ink for this because it was the colour that I wanted, but I cannot remember off the top of my head what that colour is. I will try and remember to put it in the description. And yeah, so there's the dates on there. This is me remembering to add the little bit of journaling here at the beginning. So I'm going to put a doily down and another tag and just write, that we're off on our little road trip. So yeah, this is the last one of these that I'm doing. I just forgot to do it at the beginning. And yeah, that's how that goes sometimes. Yeah, so I think I just wrote like the snacks that we had and the audiobook we were listening to. We finished listening to Anne of Green Gables on this trip and it was great, but we listened to, I reckon, the second half of the book, and there's one or two points in there where it gets really sad, and all three of us were just crying in the car about how sad the book was. And we're like, oh no, we're going to get there and everyone's going to think we've had a horrible journey because we look like we've been bawling our eyes out, but it was just from the book we were listening to. So I like that. And yeah, I didn't have to write all of that down, but I will remember that when I think about listening to Anne with these guys in the car. So that will jog that memory for me when I come back and look at this in the future. I wanted to put one of these tabs on with that floral paper, but it had yellow, bright yellow on the back, and I didn't want to introduce that as a colour. So I've just put another label in that blue, that plain blue, on there to cover up the yellow. So I just glued them together. I do that one or two more times when I add labels throughout here. And that's one of the good things also about having a punch. You know it's going to be exactly the same size and that they're going to be able to cover each other up perfectly. So yeah, a little label there. This is a little chipboard piece, but it's sort of functioning as a tiny phrase, tiny word sticker that I'm going to stick on there. Here is a longer phrase sticker, and I want it to go over where this folds. So I'm actually cutting it in half, or cutting it along where it's going to go over the fold. And I'm going to add the word yes on here because we are off on an adventure. So here I'm just adding, like I say, a few last minute things. So we're going to have a little, another little tab here. That's a good way of embellishing around a larger picture if you don't want to cover too much of it up. Like it kind of adds a little bit of extra something without actually obscuring any of the picture, which is good. And then you can always add a little phrase sticker to it if you want to, which I enjoy. I liked the colour pink of these shipping tags, and I wanted to include it in other ways as well. So I punched a couple of labels out of those at different times because it adds a bit more kind of boldness and depth to the pinks that are happening on the page. And I think that that's a really nice way of just adding a little bit of extra something on there. This was a fun embellishment because it says for you, and I thought that was cute because Jen's opening her birthday presents here. So I'm going to put a little bit of thread under that and put that sort of close to the middle of the page, as I have done on some of the other ones as well, like on that picture of the fish and chips where I stuck the embellishment right in the center. So this kind of speaks to that same idea of having the embellishment kind of quite central, but I just made sure not to accidentally cover up anything too important. Like you can still see what she's doing and then I put a phrase sticker underneath it, but I wasn't careful and it's not central, and I'm just trying not to let that bug me because there's no way I was going to get that sticker off without destroying the photo. So I'm like, you know what? It's imperfect and it's okay. I didn't want to add anything else there on the left because that page is busy enough as it is, but on the right here, I wanted to add some another tab and also some alpha stickers. Because I've started using those, I want to make sure I'm using them consistently throughout the book. I always get frustrated when I use them like a little bit at the beginning and a little bit at the end, and then there's nothing in between. And that's the same of anything, like whether it's labels or alphas or whatever else I might be using, doilies or whatever. So I will always go back and make sure I'm adding them in other places to make sure it feels balanced and I guess more intentional. Yeah. So I'm putting the word brunch on here and layering it up with a doily and some tissue paper. I was careful to fold it and leave a little bit of space where it was going to go over the little flap. And when you fold something over a flap, you do have to be a little bit careful about how it's going to move when the thing opens and closes. So I was careful about how I did that. So I want these two pages not to stick together, and because they're full-size photos, that can happen. So I'm adding a little doily in here, and that's going to actually be like a little additional page. I've trimmed it down so it's got straight edges at the top and bottom and on one of the sides, and it just kind of will help these photos not stick together. And it also gives me the opportunity to create some space for a little bit more journaling. So I'm going to do that here on this little tag, and I'm going to stick it to the doily, and that will be really cute, I think. So I'm going to put some more twine in there, and that's going to stick on there. Because doilies are not, like, you can see through them a little bit, I want to put one on the other side as well, because otherwise that would be quite messy on the back. You'll be able to see where I adhered it and all that kind of stuff. So I want to make sure that it's neat and covered up. So I'm going to put one shipping tag on here, and then I will put one like back to back on the other side. And I found another April themed, I keep forgetting the word for these things. I do it in every video. It's chipboard. I don't know why I have such a block about that word. So a tiny little bit more journaling on there, and then that chipboard there is a nice way to fill up that space there and create a bit of variation. So the front and back mirror each other, but they're not identical, which I always like. And I didn't want those two tags to have the same twine in them either. So I've put a little bit of perlate in there, which is just like the kind of thread that I use for hand quilting and things like that. So I had a bit of that kicking around, and it was a really neutral color. So I've put that in there. A little bit more thread, and that will get put in as a little extra page. So now I want to continue to embellish the outside of these little flaps. So again, I'm going to use my alphas and just select colors that match, and I just put 3-letter words on there, so fun, sea and sun, and that's done. I definitely wanted to do something to the left-hand side here, so I'm adding another tab. Because it's got stripes on it, that paper, I wanted to be careful that they were always in the same orientation as they were like when I had them as pages as well. So this tab was always going to come out to the side so that the stripes on the pattern were vertical and not horizontal. I know that sounds like a tiny detail, but to me it makes a big difference. So that's going there at the side. And then I have a phrase sticker here that says, "Don't forget to fly." And I didn't want the flying part. I just wanted "don't forget," because then this little semicircle says, "You're the best." So I'm putting that down, and then I'm going to put the semicircle over the top of that, and it will say, "Don't forget you're the best." Because I've peeled the back off this, it's got that dark coloured chipboard, and it's going to show from the other side, and I don't want that. I think it will look quite messy. So I'm putting a little bit of the patterned paper on the back. I'm just gluing that on and then cutting around the outside of it so that it looks like a little circular tab instead of like a dark kind of messy bit of chipboard. So that's going to get stuck down on there. And tacky craft glue is great for that. It's got a good stick on it. That's not going anywhere. And I'm going to come back and put the word fam on there with my alphas. So it's going to say, don't forget you're the best fam. But for some reason I got distracted, and I'll do that again in a minute. You'll see it when it's finished. Another tab on the top here, which is cute. And I wanted to put a sticker on the back here because that was quite a plain little pink sticky outy bit. So I wanted to make sure it had something on it. The top right of this of this photo is quite plain, which is nice, but it does say to me that I can potentially do a little bit of embellishing there. So what I'm going to do is add a little bit of a doily over the top, and then I'm going to use this chipboard piece that says egg hunt, because Katie is not currently hunting for eggs, but it is one of the eggs that we found in our egg hunt, so I felt like that worked. And I'll layer that over the top of the doily with a bit of that trusty thread on there. I really like having this kind of peachy coral colour with that baby pink because it provides a little bit of contrast, but they still look like they belong together, and I really like that sort of slight variation that really makes it interesting, but still kind of harmonious, I guess. So again, adding a bit of glue on there to make sure that it catches all of the little bits of the thread so it doesn't come unraveled or go anywhere. And then I'm going to trim these little edges off and make sure that's nice and neat. And that looks more finished to me. Here is another piece of one of the pink shipping tags that I've actually cut out to make it into a mini tab to stick out from the side of this little plant pot. And now I want to put on another something on here. I'm trying to, when I put a tab that's going to hang over the edge of a page, I try and take into consideration where the other ones in the book are as well. So if there was one sort of closer to the top, I'll try and balance that on another page by putting one closer to the bottom of the page, so that there's variation when you look at it and it's all closed, when it's all closed. And I like to try and bear that in mind. It can be easy when you're working on individual pages to lose sight of what the thing will look like as a whole. And sometimes it helps to be reminded of that. You can see here I'm doing another little, like an inserted page like I did on the one that was dividing the two large photos. This isn't serving the purpose of dividing the photos so much as giving me a little bit of journaling space. I wanted to write something about our breakfast and book shopping the next day. I think that's what I wrote about. So I need to find somewhere to put it. So I thought, yeah, another doily page will give me space for that. For this one, they hang over the doily a bit more, so I was able to just use one piece of twine through both of the shipping tags, so that worked well. I want to add a little title or a little bit of further embellishment on here, but I'm going to come back to it in a second because I still couldn't decide exactly what I wanted to do. I remembered as I was going through my stickers that there was one that said, "This is what family looks like," and that seemed like the perfect sentiment for that picture of our feet. And on this one, I wanted to, again, back this little tab to cover up the yellow and put that on there. So that fits in nicely. You'll notice I've just been putting a little bit of tacky glue in there every time I've put a tab on, just to make sure it stays put. I'm going to write the word magical here because I have a phrase sticker that I want to put on that says growing up. So I'm putting growing up magical. And I just like that idea of that kind of sentiment with him just sort of playing and being imaginative and, doing that kind of stuff. And the ocean itself is pretty magical too, so it just seemed right. So I'm going to use that there with more thread. And now I'm going to put the book together. So what I'm doing here is I'm folding over this thing like I showed you at the beginning, this sort of where I've scored it, which gives me a little bit more room between pages. And then what I need to do is check to see if they're sort of roughly the same width. And if they're not, what I've done is I've cut down a piece of cardstock that's the same height as the book and the same width as the spine. And I'm just literally gluing it, folding it in half, gluing it together and sticking it in here. So that creates a little bit more space between the pages to allow for all the embellishments and photos and things that I've stuck on, so that the spine isn't like massively narrower than the rest of the book. It still is when it's finished, like the pages do sort of fan out a little bit, but it definitely makes a huge difference. You can see that it's just sort of been bolstered, I guess, by those additional pieces. I made sure when I stuck them in that the folded edge was facing inward towards the inside of the book so that it would be neat when you looked through the pages, because the outside doesn't need to be neat because it's going to get covered up. You can see that I have a piece of folded cardboard here on the left, and that's going to wrap around the spine and cover the whole thing. So I have this little strip here which I'm going to use as a template, and I've marked it where I want each of the little holes to go, where I'm going to then thread through to sort of bind the book together. So I've used my piercing tool to punch holes at the same spot on each page, and also on this piece that's going to wrap around the spine. And then I'm using a big needle to go all the way through these pages. Speed that up a little bit. I have a gift for making this kind of thing look really awkward, so I hope it makes sense. But basically, I'm literally threading all the way through in one direction, coming around the back and through that piece that's wrapping around. And then I'm going to go back through to the front in exactly the same way. Like, it's the simplest binding you could possibly do. It's literally like one loop. And as long as it's like made of something strong like twine and you tie it off well, it's not going to go anywhere. I could potentially have kind of glued these pages together, but I didn't. I think I thought it would be easier to thread the needle through if they weren't all stuck together in one big kind of block, was my reasoning there. But, if you wanted to glue it together, you could. And then that's going to go through there to the front. I'm going to just sort of make sure they're neatened up and in line with each other, but that kind of happens pretty naturally as you pull the twine tight anyway, because the holes that you've pierced are all in the right spot. So then I'm going to take my needle off and tie a knot, and I'm going to do a double knot and then a bow and then a knot on top of the bow as well, so that it's not going to come untied, but it still looks cute. And that is the bound book. So in a second, I will show you the final embellishments that I added. And yeah, here we go. Let's do it.
Okay, here we are with the finished book. So after I bound it, I went through and just added the final embellishments that I wanted to add. So there were one or two spots where I put in another little phrase sticker. I added a few enamel dots and a few bits and pieces where I thought something was needed, but I didn't want to show you that process because it was just a bit fiddly, and you can see where they ended up when you look through the book. So this is the cover with the stamps with the date on it and things like that. The first page. There's enamel dots that I've added in here, which I think fills that space nicely, and then a couple up here to echo that. It was very tempting to try and fill this space here, but I decided that because there was a lot happening here and then this is a bold photo, that it would work better just left pink, and I'm pretty happy with that choice. One last thing that I will do is come through with some matte medium and just carefully stick down these edges of some of these doilies just to keep them from getting too squished over time. But that's a project for finishing up at another time, I think. This divider is great here because it will stop these two larger photos from sticking together, and I like the texture that it adds. I think obviously this is my favorite page just because of the way that there are so many different little interactive elements happening. well, they're the same element over and over again. I guess it's a repeated interactive element, but I just really like the way that you can open it up and you don't know whether you're going to get another photo or a little embellishment, a little bit of texture. It's just really fun. And this was a good way for me to add so many photos that I took from that one experience on one spread, because I had lots of action photos and I really liked all of them, so I didn't want to have to choose. Added in some more alphas here to finish this little cluster that's at the side there. Put a few enamel dots on here. Added some more alphas here too. That was definitely something that I added on in the end. Just went back and added a few like mini titles just so that that was a more consistent element throughout the book. So you can undo this and it opens out with photos on that side. Oops. And on this side. I'll tie that back up in a second. So in here we have a little bit of journaling on a tag, and then all of these photos from this one event where we went out for dinner. Another nice way of adding multiples from one little kind of moment or event without having to do multiple pages. I love a pocket. And again, this was an element that I could repeat. Another pocket with the doily on it on another page in here. Here's another doily page. And you can see with the spine in here where I did need to add more than one of the little folded over pieces to add space for this page, because there were things in this pocket, and that was a really good way of giving myself that room in a way that didn't show too much. And I just made sure that when I added the cardstock, it was the same color as whatever was around it. So if it was a pink page, I added pink, and if it was a blue page, I added blue. Use a little bit more alpha stuff. A phrase sticker there. So I'm glad I was able to use those stickers and have that as a repeated design element. A few more little enamel dots and puffy dots there. And then that's the final page. So, possibly the longest video I've ever made. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you liked it. If you just skipped to the end for a flip through, that's great. If you stuck through the whole kind of process, I hope it was fun and I was able to kind of keep you company for the best part of an hour while we did some crafting. Make sure you like and subscribe if you're so inclined. Also check out Kitaholic Kits, which is where a lot of these papers and embellishments and things came from. And I will see you again really soon. Bye.